All right, let's dive into something that's, deeply personal for millions of people. How do ancient religious traditions square up with modern LGBTQIA+ identities? It can feel like an impossible conflict, but what if the answers are buried in the past? We're going to deconstruct this whole thing. So let's just start with the big question right up front. Why is this conflict so profound? To really get to the bottom of it, we do have to go back in time. But first, to understand why it feels so urgent right now, we've got to look at the religious landscape as it exists today. You might think this is a straightforward story of religion versus LGBTQ plus identity, but the source material we're looking at shows something way more complicated. The real conflict, the deepest split, is actually happening within these major faiths. And this just lays it out so clearly. Think about it like a giant family tree. On one branch, you have traditions like the Roman Catholic Church or Orthodox Judaism that officially don't affirm LGBTQIA+ identities. But growing from the very same trunk, from the same roots, you have other branches like Reformed Judaism and the Episcopal Church that are fully affirming. This tension, the split inside the house, is what really defines the whole modern debate.
Okay, so if the conflict is internal, where did these two very different paths even begin? Well, to figure that out, we have to wind the clock back, way back. We have to go to the source code, so to speak, the ancient texts themselves.
And you really gotta wrap your head around this timeline. I mean, we're talking about scriptures written thousands of years ago. The book of Leviticus could be from as far back as 1200 BCE. The New Testament, that's first century stuff. The Quran was revealed in the 7th century. These were completely different worlds, different cultures, different everything. And here's one of the big ones. This verse from Leviticus is probably one of the most cited texts on the subject. It's really a foundational piece for prohibitions you see in traditional Judaism and Christianity, written as part of ancient social and purity codes. Fast forward to the Christian New Testament, and you get this passage from the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans. For centuries, this has been absolutely central to the condemnation of same-sex relationships in many Christian traditions. And in Islam, you have this verse. It's connected to the story of the prophet Lot, or Lutz, and it forms the primary basis for prohibiting same-sex acts in most traditional interpretations of the Quran. But here's a point the source material really hammers home, and it's a game changer. The very concepts we use today, sexual orientation, gender identity, they didn't even exist back then. They're modern ideas. These ancient texts were regulating specific behaviors in their own unique social contexts, not defining a person's entire being. So we've seen the what, the verses themselves, but our source material pushes us to ask a much deeper question. Why? Why were these rules written in the first place? What were the human fears and social anxieties driving all of this?
And the analysis suggests it really boils down to three big primal motivations. First, just simple survival anxiety. In a tough world with high mortality rates, anything that wasn't about procreation could feel like a threat to the tribe. Second, the need to control family lines and inheritance, which was everything in those patriarchal societies. And third, just a deep fear of rocking the boat. Conformity meant stability, difference felt like chaos.
And this is where the whole analysis takes a really sharp turn. The source basically throws down a challenge to all those ancient anxieties. It asks, did any of that stuff, the societal collapse, the breakdown of the family, did any of it actually happen when LGBTQ plus people were accepted? And the answer, based on the research, it's a hard no. There's just no credible evidence that inclusion leads to social decay or harms family structures. In fact, the source material is pretty clear that the real, measurable damage comes from the other side, from stigma, rejection, and violence, not from acceptance. So if those ancient fears don't really hold up under modern scrutiny, then what? Where do we go from here? Well, that brings us to the final part of this breakdown, a call for a totally new way of reading these sacred traditions. The source proposes this idea of a living testament, and it is a radical shift. Instead of seeing LGBTQIA+ identity as a problem to be fixed or a sin to be condemned, it reframes the whole thing. As this powerful quote says, it sees it as a sacred part of the diversity of creation itself. And check this out. This table breaks down that shift perfectly. In Christianity, for example, the focus moves away from specific rules to the big overarching message of love. It reinterprets those old passages as being about exploitation, not about committed, loving relationships. And in Judaism, it elevates this core value of human dignity, kavod habriot, stressing that everyone is created in the image of God. And that leads us to maybe the most important takeaway of all. This story is not over. The source material really emphasizes that faith isn't some static thing locked away in a museum. No, it's a living, breathing, dynamic process, and we are living right in the middle of a major evolution. I mean, the evidence is everywhere you look, right? Younger generations in pretty much every faith tradition are way more accepting. You're seeing entire denominations splitting over this very question. And there's a growing wave of theologians and scholars who are digging back into these ancient texts and finding new meanings. It's all in motion. So this journey doesn't end with a simple, tidy answer. Instead, the source material leaves us with one last, massive, and honestly pretty profound question. It shifts the whole debate away from rules and texts and asks something much bigger about the divine itself. It asks, are we willing to expand our understanding of God? That's a powerful thought to sit with as this global conversation continues.